Hello everybody and welcome to Toitū Curator's Corner, episode number 41. My name's Sean Brosnan, I'm a curator at Otago Settlers Museum here in Dunedin, making stories about our pioneer past. In the last episode I talked about the huge celebrations in Dunedin that greeted the passing of the New Zealand Constitution Act in 1852. Now, one of the key beneficiaries of this was likely to be Captain William Cargill, who was the most likely local candidate to be elected to the new position of superintendent of the province of Otago that was created by the Act. Captain Cargill had been in an unfortunate position ever since the collapse of the New Zealand Company the year before. That had meant he'd effectively lost his job as the company's resident agent on the ground in Dunedin, and with it, his substantial income of £500 a year. Now, I touched on some of his story back in episodes 15 and 16, including the embarrassing stoush he got into with Charles Kettle over control of the survey office once they'd both lost their jobs with the settlement's original sponsor. Cargill and Kettle had both been lucky to then get appointed to alternative posts with the civil service thanks to Governor George Grey, albeit at reduced salaries. But the uncertainty of this period added to the stress faced by all the Otago settlement's leaders, and that must go some way to explain why Dunedin was so riven by petty politics and personal rivalries in this period. And for Captain Cargill, of course, it meant that he was no longer the top dog as the Otago colony's leading official. That role now passed to the resident magistrate, Alfred Chetham Strode, who was both English and an Anglican. The new constitution, however, promised to set things to rights, and within days, 140 Otago settlers signed a request to Captain Cargill to put himself forward for the office of Superintendent of Otago, that elected post created by the new constitution. But they were getting a bit ahead of themselves here, as the elections wouldn't be for some months. Their enthusiasm, however, for his cause must have buoyed the old captain's spirits. That would have been even more important once he got this curt letter from Wellington in January 1853, abolishing his post as Commissioner of Crown Lands, and with it, of course, his government salary. Once that news became public a couple of months later, the old captain's supporters rallied around him even more dramatically. As far as they were concerned, of course, he was an absolute shoo-in as the leader of the new province. Who else would have the temerity to stand against him? Well, the little enemy had their own ideas about that. They were going to put forward as their candidate the peppery Welsh leader of the little enemy faction, Dr. Robert Williams. But that's a story for another day. Today, I want to focus on how that enthusiasm for Captain Cargill was expressed at the beginning of 1853. That was by way of the largest public dinner yet held in Dunedin, attended by 214 guests. Now, the reason I'm making a point of sharing this story is because I've always had a bit of an issue with Captain Cargill. As an historian, it really doesn't do to have favourites among the characters who populate our pioneer story, but inevitably you do, as well as those characters that you just don't warm to. And to be honest, I've always struggled a bit with Captain Cargill. Now, I've always admitted that it was his stubbornness and tenacity that saw Otago come into being in the first place. Without them, the settlement just would never have happened. But that same stubbornness and tenacity in the colony itself then played out in all sorts of confrontations with different people that were just kind of dumb and that make you think he was just a stubborn old goat, really. So I wanted to get in ahead of telling those stories, which I'm definitely going to do in some future episodes, by acknowledging the great esteem that he was held in by the pioneer settlers that he led. And they, of course, knew him a lot better than I ever will. The public dinner was held on the 6th of April 1853 at the Royal Hotel in Princes Street, or more accurately, out the back of the hotel in a temporary structure erected for that purpose, since there was no building then in Dunedin that could accommodate over 200 guests to a sit-down banquet like this. It was just under 30 metres long, with tables arranged down each side and across the top and bottom. There were chandeliers hung above for lighting, and the room was decorated with flags, including a big central one representing the 17th century Scottish Covenanters, from whom Cargill so proudly traced his descent. There were numerous speeches, of course, led off by James Adam, whose story I told in episode 8, and who represented the ordinary working people of the settlement, who, by his account, very much looked up to the old captain as a father figure. Adam was also a great singer and delivered an impassioned version of Robert Burns' great paean to the brotherhood of all men, "A man's a man for all that." And then also led the participants in Auld Lang Syne at the end of the dinner. Much was eaten, many drinks were drunk, and it was altogether a very jolly affair. The old captain lapping it up as he sat there, proudly wearing his military service medal from the Peninsular Wars with all its battle clasps that you can see in this portrait. Much of the speech-making, however, was directed against Governor George Grey, widely derided in Dunedin as the bane of the Otago settlement at this time. So it comes as some surprise to find that a few years later, on a visit to Dunedin in 1875, that Sir George Grey had only good things to say about the now deceased Captain Cargill. And he is, of course, known as a very slippery politician, apt to speak with a forked tongue at the best of times. But with those caveats in mind, I'm going to finish with his tribute to the old captain. He did not believe that a more wise or sagacious man than Captain Cargill had almost ever existed. He was accompanied by other men of great ability, of great experience, and of great goodness of character. He firmly believed that as long as this country lasts, there would be families tracing with pride their origin from the men who founded the settlement. And if we add in the women who helped found the settlement, on this at least, I think we can agree.